My friends and crew were sick people. I went straight into the bushes.
Roger Barr's time on chasing classic cars was not all shiny and happy. Behind the cameras, there was someone he didn't like. Who was this person, and why the hate? Join us as we uncover the Chasing Classic Cars, cast members who Roger Barr hated most. Roger Barr before chasing classic cars. Roger Barr was more than just a smiling face on chasing classic cars. Long before television cameras found him, he had lived a full life filled with cars, racing, and mechanical skill. His story begins in the years after World War II, when the world was still finding its way and young men were dreaming of adventure. Roger was one of those young men who had an endless fascination with machines. He wanted to know how they worked, how they could go faster, and how he could make them better. Roger grew up in a time when cars were not just a way to get from one place to another. They were a symbol of freedom. He developed a natural curiosity about engines and quickly became known as someone who could fix almost anything. His hands learned the language of wrenches and gears at a young age. This passion led him to focus on engineering and mechanics, and he soon found himself working on engines that would one day roar on racetracks. After his early years, Roger's path took him into the U.S. Air Force, where he served as a mechanic. The Air Force gave him structure, training, and a deeper understanding of how machines worked. More than that, it gave him discipline and a sense of teamwork that would guide him for the rest of his life. During this time, he built confidence in his abilities and carried those lessons with him into the civilian world. Once his military service ended, Roger returned to his love for automobiles. He was drawn to the excitement of sports cars and racing. In the 1950s and 1960s, European cars like MGs, Jaguars, and Porsches were becoming more popular in America. Roger became a part of this growing culture. He worked with race teams, tuning cars and preparing them for competition. His skill and steady hands made him a trusted figure in the racing community. It was not long before he was building a reputation as one of the best mechanics around. Roger's career in racing took him to some of the most important tracks in the United States. He worked on cars that competed in well-known races, and his name became tied to success on the track. At the same time, he taught younger mechanics and shared his knowledge. This made him not only a skilled technician, but also a mentor. Many racers and mechanics who crossed paths with Roger remembered him for his patience, humor, and the way he always had time to help someone learn. In addition to racing, Roger became an instructor at a technical school. He taught automotive technology to students who wanted to follow the same path he had taken. Teaching gave him joy because it allowed him to pass on decades of experience. He believed that cars connected generations and that young people could learn responsibility, precision, and pride through working on them. By the time chasing classic cars came along, Roger Barr had already lived a lifetime filled with engines and racetracks. Now, before we dive into the cast member of Chasing Classic Cars that Roger Barr hated most, let's take a look at the key individuals of this show and what they were known them. Rise of Chasing Classic Cars and its legendary crew. For 16 seasons, Chasing Classic Cars became a show that car lovers all around the world looked forward to. It was more than just a program about vehicles, it was a story about discovery, history, friendship, and passion. Each episode followed Wayne Carini as he traveled across the country, uncovering rare and forgotten automobiles, breathing new life into machines that most people had long abandoned. While Wayne was the recognizable face of the series, the real magic came from the crew that surrounded him. Together, they formed a team that turned rusty dreams into shining treasures. And they did it with warmth, humor, and a bond that felt as genuine as the cars themselves. The story of this crew begins long before the cameras were ever turned on. Wayne Carini was born into the world of automobiles. His father, Robert Carini, owned a respected body shop in Glastonbury, Connecticut. From a young age, Wayne was surrounded by rare vehicles, restoration projects, and the sound of engines echoing through the workshop. Just down the road, another figure was building a name for himself, Roger Barr, a gifted mechanic who specialized in foreign cars. While Robert and Roger were competitors in one sense, they shared a deep respect for one another. If Robert needed advanced mechanical work, he sent cars to Roger. If Roger needed body repairs, the Carini shop handled it. This professional exchange built trust, and it wasn't long before young Wayne found himself drawn into Roger's world. For a boy fascinated by machines, Roger's garage was like a playground. Here he saw Ferraris, Maseratis, and Alfa Romeos up close, and he learned that each car carried its own story. This connection between Wayne and Roger would become the foundation of chasing classic cars decades later. What made the show unique was not just the cars, but the chemistry between its people. As the central figure of the show, Wayne was more than a car dealer or restorer. He was a storyteller. His ability to spot hidden gems, understand their value, and bring them back to life gave the series its heartbeat. Wayne was smooth, approachable, and knowledgeable, but above all, he carried a deep respect for history. Every time he uncovered a vehicle, it wasn't just about money or business. It was about preserving a piece of the past. He also had the gift of communication. He could negotiate with owners, convince them to part with beloved cars, and then take viewers along on the restoration journey. His calm, respectful style made him a trustworthy face on screen. Yet Wayne himself often admitted that he wasn't the only reason the show became such a hit. Much of the soul of chasing classic cars came from the men who worked beside him. Roger Barr quickly became the heart of the show. To the audience, he was more than a mechanic. He was the wise, sometimes gruff craftsman whose hands had touched engines for decades. By the time he appeared on Chasing Classic Cars, Roger was in his later years, but he carried with him a wealth of experience and charisma. Viewers adored him. His sharp wit, steady hands, and no-nonsense style brought balance to Wayne's smooth personality. Their friendship wasn't a script, it was real. Decades of respect and shared history made their partnership authentic, and that authenticity is what drew fans in. Many admitted they tuned in as much for Roger's banter and brilliance as they did for the cars. Though Wayne and Roger were the faces viewers saw most, Chasing Classic Cars thrived because of its larger team. Behind the doors of F40 Motorsports, several other craftsmen played key roles in turning forgotten vehicles into works of art. Jim Carr, known for his steady presence, was one of the mechanics who often worked alongside Roger. He specialized in detailed repair jobs and was trusted to handle tricky projects that required patience and precision. Fans noticed him less than Wayne or Roger, but his work was vital to the shop's success. Evan Ide, a vintage car historian and appraiser, brought a scholarly touch to the show. His deep knowledge of rare automobiles helped Wayne uncover details about vehicles that even their owners sometimes didn't know. His expertise made sure the restorations were not just mechanical fixes, but true preservations of history. There were also garage hands like Mike and other assistants who came and went throughout the seasons. Each brought their own style, whether it was helping with welding, bodywork, or simple maintenance. While they weren't as highlighted as Wayne and Roger, their teamwork kept the shop running smoothly, especially during high-pressure projects. The crew's dynamic made viewers feel like they were part of a family garage where everyone had a role and everyone's work mattered. When Chasing Classic Cars first aired, it tapped into a unique space. Car shows were popular, but most focused on customization or speed. Wayne's program was different. It focused on discovery, preservation, and authenticity. Viewers were not only watching cars being restored, but also learning the history behind them. Each vehicle was treated as a living piece of culture. the show also allowed audiences to dream. Watching Wayne and his crew rescue a forgotten Ferrari from a barn or bring an old Maserati back to life gave people hope that history could be preserved. It showed that beauty could be hidden in the most unexpected places and that with patience and passion, anything could be restored. The series continued to grow, reaching 16 seasons. But by season 14, fans noticed something was wrong. Roger Barr, the man who had become the heart of the show, was suddenly missing. There was no farewell, no public explanation, and no message from Wayne or the network. Viewers were left confused. For a show that thrived on authenticity and family-like warmth, the silence surrounding Roger's absence felt unsettling. Speculation spread quickly. Some believed Roger had chosen to retire due to age. Others feared for his health. In the absence of clarity, rumors filled the gap. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: chasing classic cars was never the same without him. The balance between Wayne's polished storytelling and Roger's grounded presence had been broken. So what started the hatred between Roger Barr and this crew member? The fall of a friendship. Roger Barr's painful goodbye. It started with something no one expected. In the middle of what should have been an ordinary day at Wayne Carini's F40 Motorsports shop, Roger Barr suffered a serious accident. The result was a terrible injury to his leg. For a man who had spent his whole life standing on concrete floors, lifting heavy parts, and bending over cars, this was not just painful, it was life-changing. What followed after that injury made things even worse. His leg developed an infection so severe that it put him in the hospital. Suddenly, the strong, witty, and hard-working mechanic that fans loved to see on Chasing Classic Cars was in a battle that had nothing to do with engines or race cars. The hospital stay was long and difficult, yet Roger was not the kind of man to sit still for long. As soon as he could, he returned to work, determined to stay busy in the shop. But things had changed. He could no longer put in full days. His body would only allow him to handle about 4 hours at a time before the pain became too much. Even then, he pushed himself, determined to do what he loved. Unfortunately, the situation did not improve. Doctors eventually told him that his knees had taken so much damage that both would need to be replaced. That kind of surgery was not only tough on the body, it was also incredibly expensive. For a man in his 80s, it meant a long road to recovery and months of rehabilitation. As Roger tried to manage this painful chapter, an unexpected detail about his life on television came to light. Despite being one of the most loved figures on Chasing Classic Cars and appearing in front of the cameras for more than a decade, he had never been paid for his appearances. His paycheck came only from his role as a mechanic at F40 Motorsports. Viewers had assumed he was compensated for being such an important part of the show, but the truth was different. The series had helped expand Wayne Carini's business and brand, and Wayne himself was said to have built wealth from it. But Roger, who played such a central role, saw none of that benefit. This discovery made Roger's situation even more heartbreaking. Here was a man who had worked his whole life, who had become a familiar face to viewers around the world, yet he was now facing crushing medical expenses with only a modest mechanic's salary to lean on. Fans were shocked. To them, Roger wasn't just a side character, he was the soul of the shop. His dry humor, his deep knowledge, and his natural way of working with cars made him a star in his own right. Seeing him struggle with medical bills while the show enjoyed success was a painful contrast. When friends and supporters learned what Roger was going through, they decided to step in. A group of caring people came together and started a fundraiser to help him cover the cost of his knee surgeries. The campaign, launched online, was named Friends of Roger Barr. What happened next showed just how deeply Roger was loved. Donations began to pour in from all over the world. Viewers who had never met him but felt connected to him from years of watching the show gave what they could. Within a short time, nearly $30,000 was raised. It was a heartwarming moment. The fundraiser showed that people recognized Roger's value and wanted to help him when he needed it most. It was also a quiet message of disappointment toward those who should have been supporting him already. Fans knew he deserved more than silence and more than being left to figure it out alone. The money raised was not just financial help, it was a symbol of gratitude, proof that the audience never forgot the man who had kept them entertained and inspired through so many seasons. But while the kindness of strangers lifted his spirits, Roger was soon dealt another painful blow. As he recovered from surgery and faced the difficult process of rehabilitation, he waited for some sign of support from Wayne Carini, the man he had known for decades. He expected a phone call, a visit, or even a personal word about the future of his place at F40 Motorsports. What came instead was something he never could have imagined. Rather than hearing from Wayne in person, Roger received an impersonal message. It was a formal notice informing him that his time at F40 Motorsports had ended. After more than a dozen years working side by side in the shop, after a lifetime of shared history in the same small town, it was all over with a letter. The manner of his dismissal hurt just as much as the decision itself. It felt cold, detached, and unworthy of the friendship fans had admired for so long. Roger, who had been seen as part of the very furniture of the garage, who had been the one people asked about when they visited, was suddenly treated like a stranger. For someone who had given so much of his life to cars, students, racing, and the show, it was a devastating moment. The situation did not stop there. After being let go, Roger realized that many of his personal tools were still at the shop. These were not just any tools, they were the trusted instruments he had used for years, the very items that had built his career and kept cars alive. But retrieving them was not simple. The relationship between him and F40 Motorsports had grown so strained that he had to hire a lawyer just to get his belongings back. A bond that had started in the friendly garages of Glastonbury decades earlier had now ended in the hands of attorneys. For Roger, it felt like betrayal. He had expected loyalty and care during his most difficult time, but instead he was met with silence, paperwork, and obstacles. When he should have been surrounded by support, he found himself cut off. The loss was not only professional, it was deeply personal. The friendship that fans thought was unbreakable had fallen apart in the coldest way possible. When silence speaks louder than words, when the split between Roger Barr and Wayne Carini became public, everyone waited to hear Wayne's side of the story. Fans hoped for an honest explanation, maybe even a heartfelt defense of his longtime friend. What they received instead was something very different. Wayne chose his words carefully, delivering polished, respectful comments that sounded professional but avoided the questions people most wanted answered. Whenever he was asked about Roger, Wayne always kept his tone warm. He praised Roger's talents, spoke of his value to the shop, and reminded listeners how much he respected him. On the surface, these words sounded thoughtful, yet for those who had followed Roger's difficult journey, they felt incomplete. The words were kind, but the silence behind them was deafening. Wayne never addressed the fact that Roger had not been paid for his years on camera. He never mentioned the GoFundMe campaign that fans had organized to cover Roger's medical bills. And he never explained why a man he had known for decades was dismissed with only a letter. This lack of clarity left many loyal viewers disappointed. They wanted openness. They wanted the truth. Instead, they were met with silence on the hardest parts of the story. As Roger struggled with failing health, rising medical costs, and the sudden loss of his job, Wayne's career only grew larger. By this point, Wayne was juggling several thriving businesses. His well-known dealership, F40 Motorsports, continued to sell classic and exotic cars. His collision shop served high-end clients. His private restoration workshop gave him freedom to choose personal projects. Beyond the garage, he was branching into new ventures. He launched a magazine, started a podcast, and even teased possible new shows with other networks. His empire was expanding in every direction, his name stronger than ever in the automotive world. The contrast was striking. On one side stood Wayne, polished and successful, running multiple businesses and creating fresh media projects. On the other stood Roger, the veteran mechanic, now elderly, injured, and trying to piece his life back together after losing the stability he once had. The public saw a man moving forward and another man left behind. To many, Wayne's words of respect looked like a calculated strategy. By keeping his comments vague but positive, he maintained his image while avoiding any deeper discussion. His silence on the most painful details suggested that he wanted the controversy to fade without addressing it directly. Yet while Wayne stayed focused on growth, whispers began to spread. It seemed there was more to the story, something far more personal than money, contracts, or television appearances. Not long after, a report surfaced that revealed a different side of the feud. According to the story, Wayne had been heard speaking in private about his daughter, Kimberly. With tears in his eyes, he reportedly claimed that Roger had treated her as though she did not exist. The weight of this accusation was heavy, and it immediately shifted how people saw the situation. What had looked like a dispute over business now seemed tied to something far more emotional. To understand why this mattered so deeply, one has to understand Wayne's devotion to his family, particularly his youngest daughter. Kimberly was diagnosed with autism at a young age, and her life had shaped much of Wayne's purpose outside of cars. He became a strong advocate for autism awareness, dedicating his time, influence, and resources to the cause. He organized car events that raised money for autism research, spoke at fundraisers, and used his fame to bring attention to families with special needs children. He even created a trust to help others in situations like his own. Kimberly was not just Wayne's daughter. She was the heart of his world. Everything he did outside of business was tied to protecting her, honoring her, and making life better for people like her. For Wayne, family was sacred. To slight his daughter, whether intentionally or not, would not feel like a small offense. It would cut deeply. If this report was true, it offered a powerful explanation for his actions. It could explain the distance, the cold termination, and the refusal to ever revisit the friendship. For a father who devoted his life to protecting his child, any disrespect toward her, real or perceived, would be impossible to forgive. This possibility turned the story from one of professional disagreement into one of personal heartbreak. But as powerful as this explanation seemed, it also complicated everything. For some, Roger was still the man wronged by a wealthy TV personality who left him without support. For others, Wayne was a father who had been wounded by something too close to home. Both narratives painted very different pictures, and the truth, as always, likely rested in the middle, known only to the two men involved. So where is Roger Barr now? What did he do after being fired from chasing classic cars? From struggle to peace, Roger Barr's quiet triumph. Life has a way of testing people in ways they never expect. For Roger Barr, those tests came one after another: an injury that slowed him down, a surgery that forced him to heal, the bitter taste of being fired, and the storm of public drama that followed. Many men in his shoes might have given up. They might have chosen to retreat into anger or close the door on the world, but Roger was built differently. His story did not end in bitterness. Instead, it became a story of quiet triumph, of finding light after darkness, and of learning that peace sometimes comes in the most unexpected places. After his recovery, Roger turned toward what had always been his strength: working with his hands. He found a new place where his skills could breathe again, a garage called the Paddock Car Restorations in New Britain, Connecticut. This was no ordinary shop. It was a haven for classic and vintage cars, machines that carried history in their frames and demanded the kind of care only a true craftsman could provide. For Roger, stepping into that garage was like stepping into a new world. It wasn't just a job, it was a second chance. The paddock gave Roger what television never truly did: peace. It was a space filled with warmth, respect, and people who valued him not as a sidekick or a supporting character, but as a master of his craft. Michael Donnelly, the owner of the garage, saw Roger for what he truly was: a walking library of knowledge, someone who carried decades of experience in his hands and mind. Unlike the drama of cameras and television schedules, here Roger found simple joy in doing what he loved most. Every day brought him back to the essence of who he was: a man who loved cars, loved the work, and loved the honest hum of a garage where respect was given freely. At the paddock, he discovered something beautiful. The environment was soft, filled with kind faces and calm energy, a perfect balance to the stress-filled world he had left behind. Roger often expressed how deeply this new chapter touched him, describing the shop as a place where he felt true happiness. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.